welcome to Building Your Capacity. So excited that you're joining us again this evening to talk about something that affects us all, communications. We all want to be heard and understood. What if you could actually communicate more effectively and be able to share exactly what you want, what the idea is in your head, in a way that the person you are talking to understands it? Well, our guest is an expert in marketing and communication, and he wants to share with us today about Communications 101. Welcome, Mr. Dave Baseler.
Hi, Michelle. It's great to be with you.
I'm so glad that you're able to join us here on the show. Dave, thank you so much for being here. Won't you share a little bit with us about your background, including how you got started in marketing and communications?
Okay, thank you. Well, I was privileged to be born to Christian parents in St. Louis, Missouri. I went to Wheaton College in Illinois, where I got a BA degree in speech, but I majored in radio and television because I thought I wanted to be a radio announcer. And I also met my dear wife, Phyllis, at Wheaton. We got married right after graduation, and I went into the Army, where I spent 2 years in New York City at an Army movie studio making training films and TV shows. Then after the Army, I spent a few years in radio. I did some radio broadcasting and working long shifts, 7 days a week, that kind of thing. But eventually I realized that really wasn't the best place for me.
Okay.
So I got a job at Eaton Corporation, which makes capital goods, all kinds of things, truck transmissions and brakes and everything like that. And I managed the marketing communication departments for several divisions. Then in 1984, I was contacted by Bill Pollard, who was the CEO of ServiceMaster. Bill had graduated from Wheaton a year before I did, and we had kept in touch. And he asked me to join ServiceMaster, where I became the Vice President of Marketing Services. I had a staff of 25 people, and we managed all the advertising and brochures and trade shows and all the other communications for the entire company. I was also responsible during the time I was there for producing the company's annual report. I retired from ServiceMaster in 1999, and I've spent the past 24 years helping Christian organizations and other nonprofit organizations rebrand and rename themselves. And I've also provided training and support to organization boards in the Carver method of policy governance.
Yeah, I remember, Dave, many years ago when we met at Christar. You're a member of the board of Christar, a missions agency.
Yeah.
The missions agency I was a part of, and fun memories of that time.
That was a great experience.
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned in your background was ServiceMaster. Can you tell us a little bit about that organization?
Sure. ServiceMaster was originally started in the 1940s as a residential cleaning company.
Mm-hmm.
And then during my time with the company from 1984 to 1999, the company grew into being a Fortune 200 company. It had sales of over $6 billion, and it was performing cleaning and pest control and maid service and home warranties and lawn care for residential customers. And then it was also doing the management of these and other services in hospitals and schools and large industrial plants. My time at ServiceMaster was a real life-changing experience for me. The company at that time had 4 objectives, and they were to honor God in all we do, to help people develop, to pursue excellence, and to grow profitably. And I learned through my experience of ServiceMaster that I could integrate my faith in Jesus Christ with my everyday work, which is really great. I didn't have to be one person on Sunday and another person on Monday. Mm-hmm. One of my best experiences at ServiceMaster was working with the CEO and then chairman, Bill Pollard, to edit and promote his first book. I'm still in touch with Bill, and I still manage the promotion and distribution of his books. He now has 3, and my website has more information about that.
Yeah. So I think it's really important that you got your start, how you got your start, and then you were able to use it in Service Masters
Yes,
in order to not only shape and develop how you looked at work and how you were able to integrate your faith, but also how you were able to help Service Masters and others in communication, right?
yes,
So
it's been a real
good.
privilege.
hmm Today we're going to focus on the basics of communication, what you call Communications 101. You actually have it there on your website. Um, and you talk about communication. So tell us in general, how do you define communication?
Great question. The best definition I've found is this: communication is the transfer of an idea from one mind to another as intended. And those last two words are very important. We can transfer ideas from one mind to another, but it may not be the way we intended. Now, I believe there are three things that we have to consider in communications. First is the purpose or the why of communication. We communicate for one reason, and that is to get action. If there's no action, there's no communication. Until the receiver of the information is able to understand the information, no communication has been established. And then there's the plan of communication, and that's the when of communication. It's important that we pick the best time to communicate. How many times have we tried to communicate when somebody else is busy doing something else, and then we don't understand why it doesn't work? And
Right.
thirdly, there is the process of communication, or I call that the how of communication. What medium and which tools should we use to communicate? Is our communication so important that it must be face to face? Do we use the phone or email? Do we write a letter? Is our communication formal or informal? Those are the kind of the basics of it.
Yeah, so communicating, a lot of times we say, okay, I have communicated, I've said what I needed to say, but if the other individual doesn't understand, it really is not effective communication, right?
Absolutely, you're right on.
Yeah, so you explain in your Communications 101 a 7-step diagram, kind of explaining communication. Could you describe that for us?
I'd love to, Michelle. This is a great opportunity and I appreciate it. It's almost impossible to understand how an idea can be transferred from, from the sealed vault of one mind to the sealed vault of another mind. Only
Mhm.
the human being has this capability. But for it to happen, we have to develop an awareness of what communication is and how it works. So I put together a bunch of years ago, I put together a simple 7-step diagram that helps us understand how communication works. So we start with an idea, which originates in the information source, which is our mind. At this point, there's no form to the idea. In fact, maybe there aren't even words to the idea.
Okay.
To put the idea in a form in which we can express it, we have to send it through our code book. The code book actually puts a symbol to the idea. You know, words and letters are merely symbols. The
Mhm.
symbol we attach to our idea depends on what's in our code book. So it's important to understand what our code book contains. Simply, it includes things like our experience, our knowledge, our attitudes, our abilities, and our emotions. That's just part of what's in there. It's everything that we're about. It also contains our language abilities, such as our vocabulary. Our code book is the total of all of our life experiences, everything we have learned and experienced. So now that our idea has more substance, we can send it to our transmitter. This is the
Okay.
first time the idea actually sees the light of day. Transmitters are such things as our voice, our hand, like writing or typing, and even our eye, such as a wink. So that's a transmitter.
So you have this code book, and then we send it to the transmitter,
That's
and
right.
then okay, and
But
then
at
what
that
happens?
point, communication is still one-sided. It's just within the sender, if you will.
Uh-huh.
So our diagram isn't complete. We talked about the transmitter. At this point, the transmitter has to send the idea across a channel. And
Okay.
this is the medium used to transmit the idea. It can include the air, like voice and pictures or electronic
Mhm.
signals. It can
Okay.
include paper, like letters and memos and reports, or wire, like telephone, or even touch, which would be empathy. Any means can be a transmitter. Our
Okay.
lives are full of channels today. Television and the internet are considered channels, but in the basic form, these are really combinations of channels because television, for example, uses the channels of air and wire.
Okay.
Then after the idea has crossed the channel, it goes to a receiver. Now it's gone from the person who had the original idea to the person to whom the idea is being sent. The
Okay.
receiver is any of the five senses of the person to whom we're sending the idea. And it may be not always, but it may be all of those senses.
Okay.
So now we have communicated, right? We've taken the idea, we've sent it through our code book, we've sent it to our transmitter, we've sent it across the channel, and it's gone to the receiver. Well,
Okay.
we're not quite finished there because our idea still has to go through the receiver's code book,
Okay.
which contains the total life experiences and knowledge of the receiver. In that sense, the two code books are the same, but we'll see how they're different in a few minutes. So then after passing through the receiver's code book, the idea results in action. If the idea has been properly encoded, effectively transmitted across a channel and received, and has been properly decoded, the action is a true reflection of the idea. That's when communication takes place.
Wow. A lot of times when we're talking, even when we're communicating right now, all of that is going on, but we
Right,
don't think about it, right?
that's right.
I have my code book, you have your code book, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So, are those the 7 steps? Have we gone through all 7?
Yeah, those are the 7 steps, but there's actually some places where we can have some problems, as you can imagine. Yeah, there
Yeah.
might be faulty apparatus in the transmission of the receiver. Maybe I don't speak well. Maybe if I'm a receiver, maybe my ears don't work well, or my eyesight doesn't work well. Or there can be a faulty channel. How many times have you been watching TV and the whole thing just freezes? How
Hmm.
many times has the internet gone down?
Hmm.
And these are relatively easy to correct, but typically 50% of the meaning of an idea is lost because of the differences in the two code books.
Mm.
Even though the two code books contain the same type of information, our experiences and attitudes may be completely different. So this is one of the major areas where we can improve communication by adjusting our code book to be as similar as possible to the other person's code book. There's an
Yeah.
equal responsibility for both sender and receiver to match up code books. Now, there are several codebook variations to recognize which can create stumbling blocks to communication. For example, we tend to think in our frame of reference, not the other person's. And my life experiences are going to be different than your life experiences. So my frame of reference is different than yours. Also, the amount of information we provide has a bearing on our ability to communicate. We must give all the necessary communication, but only the necessary communication. Our code books tend to fill in information we already know, which can cause us to leave gaps. And if we leave gaps, it's obvious the other person will use their code book to fill in those gaps, possibly with information we didn't intend. Another area where there can be some problems is our position in life. This can cause what we call code book camouflage.
Okay.
There are a number of common areas of camouflage, like, for example, our relationships, the relationship between a boss and an employee, the relationship between a parent and a child, our differences in financial status. All of those things are camouflage. Then there's reputation, your reputation versus my reputation. And even age can cause a problem because age differences can be a detriment in accepting what is communication. You know, what was it we used to say? Never trust anybody over 30. Well, guess what? I'm over 30.
We both are at this point. So,
Yeah. And then the other thing that can happen is that words mean different things to different people. Let me
uh-huh.
give you an example. I'm going to ask you a question. How
Okay.
do you make a Venetian blind? Well, you may be thinking about those things we hang in windows. And so you say we take plastic strips and we drill holes and we fasten them with string and we put them in a frame and we hang them in our window. But what you didn't know is that I had capitalized the word Venetian. So I'm talking about a person from Venice. So when I say, how do you make a Venetian blind? The answer is you put out his eyes.
Got it.
Now,
So,
all of these are stumbling blocks and they cause what we call noise in communication. We're all familiar with noise. We have static in our radio communicate and TV communications. So here's an exercise that will demonstrate communication noise. Just get a bunch of people together and tell them that you want to ask them a question. Tell them it's a simple question and you need an immediate answer. So build up the question by maybe rolling up your shirt sleeves and unfolding and folding your hands and doing a lot of things with your hands. Do a lot of motions that call attention to your hands. And then standing in front of this group, say, quick, how do deaf people read? And most of the time, the answer you get back will be by Braille. But of course, deaf people read with their eyes. But you've created a lot of noise in your communication by calling attention to your hands.
Okay. So you've told us about some of the stumbling blocks when we're using our code books. And I love the way that you mentioned code book, because in ministry and missions, we often refer to cultural intelligence of knowing the other person's culture. So
Right.
so it seems like it's vitally important to know about the other person's code book or culture when you're trying to convey something, because
Right.
one thing may mean a different thing to them.
You're absolutely right. And that is the responsibility of both the sender and the receiver.
Mhm.
The sender has to think about the receiver's code book and use words that are going to communicate with the receiver. And the receiver has to think about, well, now where is this person coming from when they say all these things to me?
Mhm.
And so it's the action of putting yourself in the other person's place. And that happens on both sides of that channel.
Yeah. One of the things you also mentioned, and I think it's important to reiterate, is about the timing of communications, because no matter how clear we may be or what we're trying to say, there is sometimes not the right time to say something, right?
You're absolutely right. And how many times have we all experienced that kind of thing where we say, I've got to say something to this person. It's very important that I say it to them. And they say, I'm busy. I can't talk right now, or I've got something else on my mind. And so we have to be very receptive to that. The person who is transmitting the idea has to be receptive to, and that's where I think the responsibility lies. The person transmitting the idea to the receiver has to be very sensitive to the receiver's particular situation and know whether or not they're busy. And think about this. I mean, you called me yesterday and it was early in the morning. You don't know that I don't get up at the crack of dawn. So you left a voicemail for me, which is really good. How many times do we get phone calls from people and they'll say, first of all, they won't leave any message at all, or they'll say, call me. Well, that doesn't help. You did a great job yesterday. You said, I'm calling about this, and I need to talk to you about this, and I have this and this and this. Please call me when you can. And so I knew to be prepared then, and that was very effective communication. But we have to
Yeah.
think about all those things.
Right. And you also mentioned about the source of transmission. I'm not sure exactly the word that you used, and maybe you can remind me, but how we transmit the information that we're trying to transmit. So for instance, for my college students now, most of them really rarely look at email, which is an interesting thing, but they rarely look at email. And so you can send things by email all day and they may not ever see it, but you send a text and they'll get it. So even a text saying, you have an email, check your email, will be effective. Yeah.
That is very, I'm glad you brought that up because that is very important. And that's understanding the cultural differences. I'm an old guy. And so email, there was no such thing as email when I first started working. I remember being a service master and the IT guy called me in and he said, let me show you something. And he had two laptops. There weren't even laptops in those days. It was just two computers. And he typed a message on one of them and it came up on the screen of the other one. I said, wow, that's really cool. Little did I know what a curse email was going to be. But today, the younger people, they don't do email, they do text, if they even do that.
Right.
So yeah, and that's part of understanding as an older person. My code book says write letters, make
Uh-huh.
phone calls, or now send emails. That younger person, my grandkids say, "What's all that stuff?
Yeah.
Text me."
Yeah. And I think it's also in what you said, it's important not only knowing the other person's code book, but interacting with the other person's code book rather than expecting them to
Yeah,
interact with your code book.
that's right.
Um,
That's
yeah.
right. The responsibility for communication is primarily on the original communicator. I'm the one with the idea. I'm the one that wants you to understand my idea. Why should I sit back and say it's your responsibility to figure that out? I don't have to do anything about it. No, it doesn't work that way. It's
Yeah.
my job to get it through all of that whole process and do it in a way that especially the receiver's code book is going to be able to figure it out.
Awesome. So as we think about, communication 101 and the person who is sending out the message, can you tell us or give us an example of something, you have so much experience with organizations and that sort of thing, even with service masters, of an example of when there was good communication and times when it wasn't so good communication.
Well, there are lots of examples, and in my old brain, trying to find one of them is going to be difficult. But I'll give you the one I use most of the time, and that's a
Okay.
Garfield cartoon.
Okay.
And Garfield's owner, and I don't remember what his name is, but the guy who owns Garfield says, "What do you want for dinner?" And
Uh-huh.
Garfield says, "Lasagna."
Mhm.
And the owner says, "All right, cabbage it is." And Garfield says, "What we have here is a failure to communicate." And,
I
and
like it.
that happens all the time. And how many times have you sat in a meeting and you've said something, and another person has said, "I don't know what you're talking about.
Hmm.
I don't have any clue." And this is particularly true today because we are bombarded by communication. It used to be, and I don't have the exact numbers anymore because I'm just not working on that. But when I was working, it started out that we were receiving somewhere in the vicinity. When I first got into this whole communication, we were receiving somewhere in the vicinity of about 50 advertising messages per day.
Mm.
By the time I left Service Master, that number was more like 2,500.
Wow.
2,500 advertising messages per day. And
Wow.
today is probably maybe even triple that. Because you think about it, every billboard, every street sign is a communication. All the stuff you're listening, you're driving along and you're listening to the radio, and at the same time you're talking to somebody in your car. We think that we can communicate. We use the term multitasking.
Hmm.
You know what? There is no such thing. You
Right.
cannot multitask.
Right.
And as we'll talk further, you can't listen and talk at the same time. It is a physiological impossibility.
Gotcha.
But I'm
Gotcha.
sure our viewers can think of examples in their own lives of times when they've tried to communicate and they get this look like, huh? What are you
Yeah.
what are you saying?
Yeah. And the worst part of that is in situations where you don't get that, huh? What are you saying? But you get the, oh yeah, I understand, when
Yeah,
they have no clue
it's
of
a
what you're
flat
saying.
out lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're right. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. So we go away, we the communicator, the
Uh,
person with the idea, go away thinking, oh, good, they got they got my message.
uh-huh.
Wrong.
Wrong. Yeah. Very wrong. Yeah. So this topic of communication, whether you're communicating in business, whether you're communicating to a loved one, whether you're just communicating to someone at the post office, it's vitally important that we're able to get across the messages that we're trying to send. And so, building our capacity to communicate is vital. And I don't think we spend enough time doing it,
We don't
practicing it, and
we don't
learning
think
more
about
about
it.
it. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
you're absolutely right. So hopefully knowing how this diagram works, that's why I put this together. I wanted to see how it worked. And it really helped me. And I used to teach classes both at Eaton Corporation and at Service Master. And I would use this diagram to explain to people this is how it works.
Yeah. So people are able to look at this Communication 101. You actually put a PDF up at your website. Could you tell the viewers your website?
Sure, it's www. It's actually my first initial and last name. www.d like David, BASELER, and it's .org, not .com, because most of the work that I do, virtually all of the work I do, is with nonprofits. So that's ORG instead of COM. dbaseler.org.
Well, Dave, thank you again for being with us on um, building your capacity, and we're excited that we will do Communications 101 Part 2 next week. So thank you very much.
Thank you.